Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the September 21st, 2022 Worcester Board of Supervisors business meeting. Would you please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? Good evening, folks. My name is Rick DiLello, Chairman of the Board. To my left is Lou Betts, our Vice Chair. To my right is Steve Quigley, our third member. Over on the side table, we have Blake Dunbar, who is here from our Solicitor's Office. We have Paul Leonard, who is our Interim Township Manager, and we have Nicole Quagliariello. I'm closer, probably further away, but our Finance Director. First and foremost, does anyone have any informational items for the board tonight? Thank you, Blake. I'll also note that tonight's meeting is being recorded. Please be aware of that. First and foremost, we have public comment. We do ask that you try to limit your public comment to 5 minutes. Winnie?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Just a brief comment. I depend on the accuracy of information posted on the township's website. And I went and looked yesterday and found out the zoning hearing board meeting was next Tuesday. That information was incorrect. It was last night. So I'm just asking that somebody be responsible for really checking on things like that because we do depend on it. That's all. Thank you.
And I'll take responsibility for that mistake. My apologies.
Thank you for your comments. Jim?
Jim Malik, Worcester. I don't know whether any of you guys got to take a look at the fall newsletter. Excellent, excellent piece of writing, I got to tell you. I was particularly impressed with the supervisor's reject call to raise taxes. Nothing in this piece is inaccurate. Well written, well done, accurate, nothing false in this article. Now, the reason I'm bringing it up is basically, and I don't want to put words in your mouths, but why double tax residents in the township when you've already overtaxed them one time? Meaning, if you got a $14 million surplus, there's only one way you get there, and that's to overtax people. Okay? It just doesn't happen. You tax at a level, you don't spend as much, and then you get the surplus. And year after year, you do the same thing till you get $14 million. So that's what happened. Overtaxation, $14 million surplus. Then, on top of it, people wanted you to tax again when you have money already to do the job. As you can see on your agenda tonight, you're floating a bond for $2 million for open space, but we're not getting double taxed to do it. We're using the money that we paid or we were overtaxed to do it. So I think that's the way to go. Now, I was surprised to learn, even though you purchased 40 prime acres at a discount in a great location, that my good friend Bert Hines and the Friends of Worcester weren't happy with that. I missed the last meeting, but apparently you read a letter that, they were displeased and misinformation or whatever. And apparently the letter went out to residents in the township. And in that letter, it references a petition with 900 signatures. Well, I said, I want to take a look at that. Did a right to know request. Guess what I got? You guys didn't get the original. Did you know that? You didn't get the original petition. You got a copy, right? And even worse, they cut part of the petition off when they did the copying. Guess what part of the petition got cut off? Email addresses. Okay? Now, why would that be? Why would you, first of all, what's with the email addresses, and then why do they get cut off? Because what I think you can, Mr. Hines is here, maybe you guys can get a complete petition, a valid petition. You couldn't act on those petitions because they were altered. They're altered. Emails are cut off. So ask Mr. Hines to give you the petitions with the email addresses so that the township can provide these 900 people with accurate information and the other side of the story. If you look at Mr. Hines's letter, he made it out that you guys totally ignored those 900 people and didn't take them into account. Well, first of all, you can't do it. They didn't give you the originals. You didn't have valid petitions. But if you remember, there were 20 people in this room the night of the referendum vote. There weren't 900 people. People were coming out, getting done the vote. All they wanted to do is get out of here. They're like, oh, yeah, I'll sign it, okay? So I'm all about transparency and giving everybody the info rather than one side monopolizing an email list and the information. So, hey, Bert's here. Say, Bert, why don't you give the email list to the township? Then you guys can communicate with those 900 people who they were disparaging the board as ignoring and not taking them into consideration. And you can give your side of the story, because two sides of the story is always better than one. Propaganda. So if you would consider that, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. As always, we appreciate your comments. Does anybody else have any public comment for the board? Bert?
Bert Hines, Worcester. No tablet here tonight to write on, but I guess that's okay. You know me by name. I do agree
Maybe
with
the
Dr.
planning
Malik
commission took it with them. Did they take it on
that
the way
there are
out?
two sides to every story.
Okay.
And the way he reads things and the way I read them, it's not always the same. When I read the township newsletter, frankly, I was appalled. I have always looked at the township newsletter as something that was informative, fair-minded, honest, and showed all of the residents that the township was trying to communicate clearly what was going on. When I read that article about turning down taxes, and I forget the exact wording because I didn't bother bringing it with me tonight, that wasn't what was being voted on and what we were even asking for. We were asking for a referendum. We were asking for a vote and giving the folks in this township the right to weigh in. And if the answer had been yes, yes, there would have been an increase in taxes. But asking people to vote and then giving them the information to vote with and telling them what it would have costed them, yes, that's fair. But that wasn't what we were talking about specifically in July. It was about putting a referendum on the November ballot. So the way that article was written was very unfair. I just did not see it as accurate and very unlike articles that I was used to reading in the township newsletter. In terms of the petitions, when you were given the petitions, yes, the email addresses were cut off. Folks had been told that we need your email address in case we need to contact you, but we're not going to share that with others. So it was kind of we were keeping our part of the bargain by not sharing that with you. nothing sinister about that. It was just confidentiality and privacy that we saw, that we were assuring folks that we were giving them. So that's why it was done that way. I know the referendum is a dead issue right now, but it would have given, and I've spoken before this board before, it would have given folks an opportunity to weigh in. And I don't know what the result would have been. None of us do. And unfortunately, we won't be able to find out. But it was not directly about raising taxes, and it wasn't the way that article was written. So that's all I have to say.
Okay,
Unless
Bert,
you have any questions.
I don't have
Bert,
any
a
questions.
question. You said you got the email addresses for what purpose? To communicate with the people, or I missed what you said.
From Friends of Worcester and other individuals gathered those email addresses.
Right.
And people were concerned that what will happen with these email addresses, and we said we're not sharing them with anyone else.
So the Friends of Worcester kept those emails. Who has the email address now?
Friends of Worcester.
Okay. Did you follow up with any emails to any of the people?
I don't know the answer to that exactly.
I personally think that if I would have known I didn't know, we didn't get the official thing that was given out to the people. We got a third of it. It would have been nice that the township would have made sure those people who signed the petition, the township could have crafted a letter to send to all those people and explain the vote, rather than the letter that he says that, you say that, regarding what went out as far as the interpretation, to let the people know why the township, what they did, how the township handled the situation.
And you know what, Steve? If that was requested of us for that reason, I think we would have been more than
Yeah, I didn't know
happy to
about it until
share
he said something about that
Yeah.
tonight. I'm just thinking about it. So, and once again, I'll say it, as we discussed it, I did get your letter about having the meeting coming up, the farmland preservation. I'm on, well, I guess Steve works for our board that I'm involved in, the farm board, so I will not be attending that. That being said, I encourage the people again that we do have a fundraising drive in Worcester that the people can contribute to the open space fund. The township went and bought the land. If any individual would like to contribute to the fund, we have a goal there. So I say again that the people who really want to preserve the open space, we have a fund there. I think somebody said, hey, we contribute in other ways. Well, that's good. A lot of people contribute a lot of the funds, but this is the fund regarding the open space of Worcester. If you choose to do that, we're encouraging the residents to contribute money to try to buy some more of this land.
And we're supportive of that, Steve. I think some folks have not contributed to that with the idea that there may be a referendum down the road, and then ultimately there may be a tax that people would be paying for that. So absent that, I think folks may reconsider, and as you get closer to the end of the year and they look at what their tax situation is and their giving situation, I think you're going to see support.
Yeah, the one lady did mention that, hey, we're waiting for the referendum. Now, I'm saying the referendum for now is on hold.
Right.
It got voted down, so I'm encouraging the people that are listening, watching, to contribute to the fund to help the township.
And I want to thank you for the plug there for the land
Right.
preservation
28th,
presentation.
correct?
It's going to be 1 week from tonight here at 7 o'clock, and certainly everyone is invited to
Right.
learn.
So September 28th in this building at what time again?
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock. So anybody who's listening to the recording, it'll be in this room 1 week from tonight, the 28th, 7 o'clock.
Steve's a very knowledgeable fellow, so you have a good person making a presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bert, we certainly appreciate your comments on that. What I would say is ultimately we took the information that was provided. I think my stance in the July vote and meeting was pretty clear. It's on the video in terms of where I stood on that particular item. And at the end of the day, you know, I didn't take it any further than that ultimately in terms of the list. But you're entitled to your interpretation. Jim's entitled to his. And as Steve said, that's exactly kind of part of the deal. So thanks for the comment. Winnie, I got you. Come on up.
I'll be brief. I took less than a minute, I think, the first time. So I have a question. On the donations to the township for the Open Space Fund, are they tax deductible? Is that considered a tax deductible donation? Does anybody know?
I'm not sure.
I have
think the
people
answer is-
asking me.
Sure, we can certainly find that out. I don't know the answer immediately, Paul. If we could just make a note as to whether that's an item that is tax deductible or not. But certainly we can share that information by all
Yeah.
means. I think the answer is yes, but I don't want to give false information.
Yeah, I don't know, but it is something that people are asking. And as Bert mentioned, as we come to the end of the year, and for us older folks who have mandatory distributions from your 401k,
Yep.
it is something that could be done, and it would be useful to know. You were going to make a comment?
Yeah, what's your definition of old?
Certainly not my age, considerably older. Yeah. The second comment is a comment about the removal of the email addresses that people had given us in confidence. We have seen over the last 20 years a weaponization of the Right to Know Act. And frankly, those email addresses in the hands of the township to be used to follow up certainly is appropriate, but not in the hands of people who might request it on a right-to-know basis. And in order to get that ability to do follow-up, we had to assure them that they would be confidential, and that's just a comment. I'll make another comment. The weaponization of right-to-know request is really excessive in our township and in our school district. So I did a right-to-know request of the school district, Methacton School District, and I asked what the number of requests and what were they for the last 7 years for Jim Mullick, and how much did it cost the school district? This is interesting. So they're still digging. They haven't given me at all, but they were able to give me from December of 2019 through January of 2021. In that period of time, the cost to the school district was almost $1.3 million. Now, you might argue that they should have handled it differently with their attorneys, but the fact of the matter is that's a huge amount of money. And if you take a look, just take a look, I'll be happy to share what I found. You take a look at the kind of requests that are being made, they're excessive and they are definitely harassment. Thank you.
Winnie, I think under the previous administration, our right to know requests were $350,000 or some fee, a lot.
$1.3 million.
Exactly.
Yeah, I
But
won't.
I think we have to understand that the law firms have realized this is a golden goose for them.
I agree.
And if you go to a school board meeting, and I've been to about 10 school board meetings in the past year,
Right.
and I'm embarrassed as a resident of the township, a grandfather of kids in a school district, that I put people on that board, and you go and ask a question, a simple question, and they won't answer it.
Okay.
That's appalling.
I'm not
We
saying.
solved the problem here. We had the township
I got
manager
it. I know-
look at
I
the
know
right
the
to know
history.
and give the information to people rather than withholding
And I
it.
included in my statement the comment that they may not be handling this as best they should. There may be an over-dependence or utilization of legal counsel. But you have to go back and look at what those requests were, and you have to ask yourself the question, is this the way you want your support personnel to be spending their time gathering this kind of information, and for what purpose? So I just make that comment.
Sir, I get it. We appreciate the comments as we always do, and I think I stand very firmly on the notion that we try to answer questions and we try to. We have a very simple philosophy now when it comes to a right to know request, is we follow the law, and the law is very clear about what documentations that people are entitled to, and unfortunately, the law is very explicit on saying we don't get to make the judgment call as to whether we think it was a good request, a bad request. I mean, it just.
But there is
unfortunately-
confidential information that's in requests sometimes, and they have to be reviewed.
Well, they need to be
and
redacted.
That has to be redacted.
You are
if it-
correct. There are,
That's all I'm saying.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, we were able to solve the problem here, as Steve said, and I think that we're in a better place because of that, but we honor the law, even though we don't always agree with it.
I agree with honoring the law. All I'm really saying is think about the effort that's going into this, and without further investigation to know what were the lawsuits that ensured, what were the outcomes of it, who got this, who got that, I'm just simply saying, You want to know why those emails were set aside? Because people would not have given us those emails if they'd known that they could have been procured through a right-to-know request. It's just that simple.
Okay, does anybody else have any additional public comment for the board tonight? All right, seeing none, we will move forward. First item on our agenda is our consent agenda. First and foremost, does either board member wish to remove any items from our consent agenda tonight? Okay. Then I will entertain a motion if somebody would like to make them regarding this consent agenda. Okay, and just for the record, the amount of the bills this month is $449,537.36. Do I have a second?
I will second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Next item on our agenda is going to be a motion. It's going to be to accept a loan proposal from People's Bank and Trust Company, and I'm actually going to ask Ed if you would come forward ultimately to give us just a little bit more information on this item. For the mic, we're just going to ask you to introduce yourself fully and sort of where you're from, and then we'll have a quick explanation.
Sure. My name is Ed Murray. I'm from Stiefel Public Finance.
Is the mic on there? And if not, can you just make sure you pull it close to
Yeah, it's open. So my name is Ed Murray. I'm from Stiefel Public Finance. My partner, Mike Wolf, and I have represented the township since, I think, 2008.
Okay.
The last bonds that were issued in 2017, Mr. Wolf and I worked on for the township. I guess we started working on this project back in May.
Okay.
Met with Mr. Ryan in June and July, and we're tasked to find the most efficient way to finance the open space purchase, being that it was fairly small amount, not small to you, but to the bond market. And the most efficient way to go about that would be to take out a bank loan. We were trying to make sure that the provisions were flexible enough so that at any time you could call that bank loan, refinance it with another financing in the future, so that you could lower the rate when you wanted to. With that in mind, we created an RFP. We sent out the RFPs to 22 different banks. We got approximately 6 responses, 4 that were good, and there was 1 that was head and shoulders above the others. Much better, gave us the terms and conditions, the rate was better, all that stuff. We're asking you to move forward. The motion is to move forward so we can go back to that person, that financial institution. They're in King of Prussia, headquartered out of, I'm not sure exactly where. But since they were the winner, all the proposals in all bank RFPs have a standard feature to them that they're only good for 30 days. They'll hold their rate for 30 days. And with some of the administrative changes that you were going through, the personnel changes you were going through, the 30 days between the time that we accepted the proposals or received the proposals and now has lapsed. So we're going to go back to the winner of the RFP process and ask them to refresh their rates. We're going to do it within the 30-day window. Then we're going to advertise the meeting legally. Any borrowing is conducted under the Local Government Unit Debt Act. We'll file the Debt Act proceedings. We'll have note counsel review for tax exemption, get all the paperwork ready, have the term sheet ready for you, and you can adopt, and you'll know what the fixed rate will be at your next meeting in October.
Okay, so I got 2 questions, and the first question is just you. I think you had said it, but I want to go back and sort of reiterate it. Is one of the characteristics of this is there's no prepayment penalty. If at some point along the way the conditions change, we want to do something different, we can maneuver without any cause or concern.
That was the central feature, yes.
Okay, and then the other point, I guess, is maybe a question for you, Blake, is ultimately what motion is needed from us here if ultimately there's a rate element that is next month. We want to give you the appropriate authority, but we just want to make sure, or maybe Paul, that's...
Well, the wording of the motion that's in your pro forma was approved by the solicitor.
Okay.
If I could be clear on this, and Mr. Murray, you can help me on this, you'll go back to the
the recommended bidder, and that, in this case, it was People's Bank. You're going to confirm what their rate is. That rate would then be incorporated in an ordinance which would be advertised. The Board of Supervisors Township is not locked in at all until you adopt it. So if you don't like the rate, and that would be confirmed sometime, you said, in the next week or so?
Correct.
Okay, so within a week, the township would be advised what their current rate is, if it's changed any. The ordinance would be advertised, and that rate would be embedded in the ordinance.
Okay.
You can still get out of this at that point.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, until you incur the debt at your next meeting, you'll be free to say no and not accept the term sheet from the winning bank.
Okay.
Rick, with all the uncertainty in the financial market right now, much of impact do you think we're going to be faced with?
Well, 3/4 of a point today. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
Serious matter.
I mean, today, today the 2-year rate, is 4.10 and the 30-year rate is below 4%. We've got an inverted yield curve. So, right now, the longer you go, the better off you are. The shorter you go, the worse off you are. We've asked for the bank to provide us with a proposal. I'm sure that increase, when I spoke with the administration last week, and then I spoke to the bank and said, listen, we know we're out of their 30 days. Would you continue to be a bidder if we let you refresh your rates? And they said, yes. I said, could you get it to me as soon as possible? And they said, we won't give it to you until after the Fed meeting, which is why I can't tell you exactly what it is
Right.
now. And I needed to make sure they'll hold their rate for 30 days, but I had to make sure. So I told them next week, so by the time your next meeting
When our
comes up,
October meeting hits, we're
you're
within-
inside of 30 days.
Okay.
So I'll know when they give me their updated rates next week. We'll distribute that back out to the administration. And if you don't like it, you could tell us to go stop it right then for all.
Right.
Because then I know it's going to be held till your meeting.
Okay.
Rick, I have a crazy question. Small business loans are out there sometimes, and banks get tax deductions for lending money at a lower interest rate. Is there an open space bank out there that likes to help townships at a lower rate? Can we,
So
there any outside funding?
People's Security was more aggressive than all the other bidders by not an immaterial amount.
Okay.
Because it's going to be classified as a bank qualified loan, they are going to get a deduction that they're qualified for to make a bank qualified loan to a municipality. It'll be tax exempt. We're going to have no counsel provide you with a tax exempt opinion on the note. And all that administrative process will happen in the intervening month before your October meeting. But yes, they took that into account. You were getting that advantage.
Okay, thank you.
If I could just ask one question, if you're ready, please. Mr. Murray, I'm not trying to put you in a spot, but there's no insurance element in this proposal. Is that right? This would be, there's no insurance component,
No,
right? And the township is not rated at this point. It was not subject to Moody's or anything like that.
no, in terms of this issue, it is not. It has outstanding rated securities, so there is a published rating for the township, and we know what that is. But again, when I said it was more efficient to do a bank loan, in this case, if I have to go get a rating, it's going to cost you approximately $16,000 to get a municipal rating. We do a bank loan, we don't have that. The bank is going to be the only person responsible for understanding, reviewing, and knowing your credit and making a loan based upon the credit that we showed them.
Right.
So they have to be, in this case, they're an institutional investor. They're making a big boy decision. We're not getting municipal bond insurance. We're not getting a rating. They're making this decision based upon their own capabilities.
The estimate for the cost for closing between your services and the bond council, do you have a ballpark number for what that's going to be?
I don't off the top.
You will provide it as part of the wrap-up on this? Thank
It's
you.
been, we've
That's all
given
I
it to the administration before, and we'll
No,
get
no,
it back.
I know you do that. I just want to make sure I ask that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Any other questions on either side? Okay, so I'm going to read it, Lou, because if that's okay with you, just because it, as Paul said, it was worked through our solicitor, and I want to make sure I get the wording correctly in terms of that. So I'd like to make a motion to accept the loan proposal of People's Bank and Trust Company of Doylestown, Pennsylvania for issuance of a general obligation note in an amount not to exceed $2,104,000 to be utilized to reimburse funds expended for the acquisition of 3335 Fisher Road, and authorize the township solicitor, loan counsel, and staff to take all necessary steps and prepare all required ordinances and documents related to the loan transaction. So our solicitor got his money on that one. So it's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion that is on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Thank you, Ed. We look forward to
Thank
hearing
you for
about the rate.
explaining that.
Thank you. All right. So next up, we're going to have the second. We had the first last month, but we have a presentation from Nicole on the 2023 budget.
Okay, so I'm going to start off with taxes. The 2023 budget includes no new taxes and no increase to existing taxes. Worcester Township's real estate tax rate is proposed to remain at 1/20th of 1 mil, which is presently the lowest municipal real estate tax rate in Montgomery County. And I expect that we will continue to have the lowest tax rate in 2023. For personnel, the proposed 2023 budget includes the hire of an additional full-time entry labor position. While this hire will increase public works salary expense, the township will see a decrease in corresponding public works expenses due to the significant savings in bringing these new duties in-house. Likewise, an additional employees are needed in the administrative department as well. The proposed 2023 budget includes the hire of an assistant township manager, as well as a hire of another full-time position to fill an HR finance administrative position. For services, there is no substantive change proposed to township-provided services in the coming year. So what we're doing today, we'll continue to do tomorrow. For the general fund, as to the general fund, first and foremost, this is balanced. At this time, the EIT, our primary revenue, is projected to receive $3.075 million. The budget includes $2.72 million in EIT in 2022. The budget assumes that real estate transfer tax will decline slightly in the coming year. The budget includes $250,000 in real estate transfer taxes in the coming year. $840,000 is projected for this year. The number assumes the transfers of existing residential properties and no transfers of commercial properties and larger tracts of land, which historically have occurred on an infrequent basis. As to expenditures, the budget anticipates an increase to health insurance premiums, and the amount of that increase will be calculated at the time DIVIT confirms the amount of rate stabilization dollars available for use. Keep in mind that the premiums now paid are 10% below the actual premium billed in 2018, made possible by the use of rate stabilization dollars in the years since. So while the township will likely pay a little bit more in 2022, the premium paid will still be below the actual premium billed. In other words, instead of paying 10% less that billed in 2018, we might be paying that billed in 2019. The budget includes a 5% increase to our annual operating contribution to our volunteer fire department to $175,000 and retains a capital contribution in the amount of $100,000. This number does not include the cost of workers' compensation coverage that is provided by the township, as is required by state law, nor does this number include Act 205 pass-through aid to the Department's Relief Association, which is budgeted at approximately $102,000. In addition to providing additional financial support to our volunteer fire department, the township is working to support those employees who serve as volunteer firefighters during the weekdays when the department is in most need of help. For many years, the township has permitted its employees to respond to fire and other emergency calls during the workday. 3 years ago, the township funded a monthly stipend for those who volunteer to answer the call for help, and the response has been tremendous. At this time, 7 township employees serve as volunteer firefighters. The proposed 2023 budget includes the continuation of the monthly stipends. Lastly, the general fund will transfer dollars to the capital fund at the end of the year. This revenue will provide for needed capital projects like our annual road program. The transfer amount will be refined in the coming weeks as we adjust the budget to reflect receipt and expenditures estimates. But at this time, the transfer is projected to be around $620,000. For the capital fund, we will be undertaking a sizable capital projects in the coming year. At the top of the list is the annual road program. The township will continue to provide an augmented resurfacing program, which will help to keep our roads in good condition, maximizing the useful life of the network. The capital fund will provide $596,000 toward the road program, which, when coupled with the dollars from our liquid fuels fund, will provide $964,000 in the road program for 2023. And remember, this does not include soft costs like design, bidding, and inspections, or the many smaller fixes made by our Public Works Department throughout the year. In addition, the capital fund also funds a sizable culvert replacement on Weber Road. Lastly, the capital fund will provide for the replacement of Public Works vehicles and equipment that have reached the end of their useful life, including the replacement of a 2012 pickup truck, a 2012 brush tripper, and a 2000 dump truck. For the sewer fund, in 2017, the township contracted with a new wastewater operator, and since this time, operations at our 2 wastewater plants and 6 pumping stations are running very well. As you recall, our contract provides for direct billing of sludge removal, testing, and chemical purchases. To date, this arrangement has proven effective in lowering these hefty expenses. As to sewer rates, the budget presently includes a 0.5% increase to residential rates in 2023, which translates to approximately 2 cents per month increase for each home on the township system. A 0.5% increase to commercial sewer rates is also proposed. The sewer fund provides $73,000 for capital improvements throughout the coming year. Just like our roadway network, the sanitary sewer system requires regular upkeep to maximize the useful life of its many components. For the liquid fuels fund, annual increases in the liquid fuels allocations under Act 89, the so-called gas tax bill, ended 2 years ago. Since this time, the township's annual allocation has decreased by 3% when controlled for the roads added to our inventory. The estimated 2023 allocation is expected to be received by month's end. The budget assumes a 2.5 decrease to our actual allocation, due mostly to, which is attributed to both continued remote working and higher fuel prices. For other municipalities, the annual liquid fuels allocation is the annual road maintenance budget. Our community does not adopt this approach. Worcester does not assume that the annual liquid fuels allocation is adequate to meet our real road maintenance needs, an approach that is more important now more than ever. As such, we budget additional dollars in both the general fund and the capital fund to meet this obligation. We will therefore offset any decrease in liquid fuels funding with additional dollars through the capital fund. Next steps. Township staff will continue to monitor our receipts and expenditures and make adjustments to the budget where warranted. We'll include new numbers like the proposed insurance premiums and the estimated liquid fuels allocation when these numbers are received. We'll present a budget update at the October 19th meeting. The budget will be presented once again in November, advertised for a 20-day public inspection period, and a public hearing will be conducted in December. That's it.
Thank you, Nicole. So Just a couple things, if folks were listening or have started to look at budgetary figures, the adjustment on the transfer tax, just if anybody's curious on that, this year was a significant year with the Center Square, the Reserve at Center Square, and Whitehall Estates, significant amounts of sales transactions. That's why that number was very high this year, and we're making an adjustment because most of those houses have sold ultimately. So going forward, that amount dropped off. And as Nicole said, we've got a very specific process we follow with the budget. We've been doing this for many years. It's one of the areas that we're very proud of as a municipality, and that we have a very strong and organized budget, but we also continue to make adjustments really year-round in terms of it's an ongoing effort every month, and certainly we appreciate all the work that gets done on that, so that by the time it gets to November and we're making a decision to advertise for adoption, it's really had a lot of time, effort, and energy, and it makes our job a lot easier. Does anybody have any specific comments on the budget at this point?
Rick, I think you hit all the technical aspects, but I on behalf of all of us, Nicole, thank you for stepping up, and you've done a great job with a limited staff in the office. So thank you very much for doing all the work you're doing, and we, the board, really appreciate it. On behalf of the residents in the township, thank you.
You stole some of my thunder on my next item. So we're not going to take public comment on the budget here. There is a public comment section if somebody wants to comment on that later, but because we're not making any kind of a vote, there's not a public comment. But it does bring us to our next agenda item, and before we get to sort of a motion in terms of that, as you all know, we accepted the resignation of our township manager in August. And we're going to make a motion to appoint somebody in a couple of minutes. But before we do that, I would be remiss if I didn't share a few details, and you know how I like to talk. So I'm going to share a few things, and then we'll have a motion, and then we'll kind of go from there. So the first order of business was on my list was when we had to make a decision on a township manager, we went to a professional recruiter to get a professional search in place and move very quickly and very rapidly. One of the challenges is when you get notice from somebody, it's a little bit of an unsettling effort, but we were very fortunate to have professional help that stepped in order to sort of help us spearhead that process, get us valid and good candidates, get sort of all the pieces in place to make, again, the job easier for us. A thank you to my two compatriots. You know, we took a lot of extra time in terms of interviews and processes to make sure that we could do a lot of things. But it was nothing compared to the work that our staff did. Paul Leonard stepped in as an interim manager and really has done a great job to sort of help us keep the lights on and help us make sure that, you know, sort of all of the high-level administrative stuff was taken care of. That took a load off this board in terms of that. More importantly, folks like Nicole, who's our finance director, took on a lot of added work. And as Steve said, it's more than a thank you. We certainly want to recognize that did not go unnoticed, that folks had to do a lot of extra things, a lot of moving parts, took on a lot of tasks, sometimes thanklessly, and certainly that did not go unnoticed at all. It was extremely helpful to us as a board, and it gave us great comfort to know that somebody was taking care of all those things. That's extremely important to us. He's not here tonight, but Bob DeHolster, who's our Public Works Director, same thing. We stepped in. It can be uncertain for individuals when there's transition. You know, as they say, it's change, but it's also great opportunity. You know, I mean, there's challenges, but there's opportunity, and we try to look at the opportunity, but we don't want to be ignorant to the fact that there were some challenges in taking care of a lot of that stuff. And certainly, you know, Bob sort of held the fort outside, and Nicole held the fort inside, and Paul made sure that, you know, that the board was properly sort of advised as things were going on. So I'm not thanking everybody enough, I'm sure. The solicitor's office as well was extremely helpful through all of that. And at the end of the day, we think we got a winner. You know, I mean, that's, you know, which is really the goal. I mean, is to get somebody that we can put into this role as township manager and a bunch of other things. If you've taken a look at the motion, there's a bunch of other tasks that go with that. But, you know, we all had ideas in terms of who we thought might be what we need and how we need it, and we certainly got a lot of input from a lot of people. Sean Halbum, what I can say clearly, and I'll allow each of my board members to share any thoughts they want to share, is he stood out to all of us. You know, I mean, and that's, we're not just saying that because he's here. I mean, that was a very quick and clear situation. So a little bit about Sean. I'm not going to share all his details, but a few things that I know stood out to us. So Sean, when he graduated high school, went into the Marine Corps, and that was certainly something that caught Lou's eye right away. So time in the Marine Corps, then he went on to college, and then he spent time with Veterans Affairs several years, and then he transitioned to a municipality where he's been the assistant township manager for several years. So, you know, my brain, as it works, I said, okay, he's a Marine, so we know he's disciplined. He worked with Veterans Affairs, so we know he cares. And then he spent time as a assistant township manager and working in a public municipality, so we know he's slightly crazy, you know, just enough in terms of the role. It takes a certain style in terms of balancing all of the things, you know. So we had 3 residents come to the mic tonight on the same topic, and we got 3 different opinions. So the ability for a township manager to handle all those differing opinions, because everybody's entitled to them, and those skills stood out to all of us when we went through the interview process, and ultimately when we made our decision, we're very confident and comfortable that we've made a good decision at the end of the day. One other little ingredient, which I can fairly say was not a deciding factor one way or another, but we still think is helpful, is that Sean's a resident. You know, Sean lives in Worcester Township, so he's not going to be able to say he couldn't get to work because it was too long a commute. You know, we've taken that away from him. But ultimately, you know, when you weigh all the pieces, there were several attributes I know were important to me. Sean satisfied all of those in spades, checked all the appropriate boxes, and then, more importantly, you know, energy and enthusiasm matters, and you know that came through in every conversation that we had with Sean along the way. So before we kind of get to a motion, I want to give either of my 2 guys on either side if you want to just add any final comments in terms of that, but we're certainly very excited to have him and add him to our team. Do you have any thoughts, Lou or Steve?
I think we're lucky to get him. I believe that all these high points, the Marine Corps, I mean, the discipline, he is a little crazy to kind of get into public service, but, you know, that's part of what we do here. No, I welcome him. I really do.
Once again, I think Lou summed that up, but Rick, on behalf of Lou and I, as well as the township, I'd like to thank you personally for, you know, spearheading this, working with the staff and making a smooth transition here. And to Paul, along this line before we forget about it, is that, you know, thank you to him, but it's the entire staff, from the road crew, everyone pitched in the township when we're short-staffed, as well as the front desk, Mary, and in the office and stuff. She's done a great job juggling things between the many things she does already, filling in where she's needed. So I think we saw the character of people we have working for the township, and I think he'll be a good complement to the people we already have. So I'm happy with it. Thank you.
Perfect. So with no further ado then, ultimately we have a motion. We got to give him a few, if you have, we just want to make sure we get all his titles. So he's coming in as township manager, but he's also got several other titles we're giving him in conjunction with that. So Lou, you're up.
So we're going to make a motion to appoint, as effective October 3, 2022, Sean Holborn, Township Manager, Secretary, Right to Know Officer, Pension Plan Administrative Officer, Zoning Official, and the Delegate to the Montgomery County Tax Collection Committee, and the Worcester Township Trustee Representative to the Delaware Valley Insurance Trust.
And can we add anything else we think about that we should add to that job description in the future?
A lot of hats.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Welcome aboard, Sean. Okay, moving.
Rick, should we have Sean just stand up and turn around so people can see his face? I mean, And that's your lovely wife, I take it? Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Steve. So moving up, we got other business. Does anybody have any other business they wish to bring before the board tonight? Seeing none, then we have public comment. Does anybody have any additional public comment for the board this evening? So I got Bert and I got Jim. So Bert, why don't you come, and then Jim, you can come after that.
Bert Hines, Worcester. I just want to follow up a little bit on something that Steve brought up, and that's the township-sponsored Open Space Fund. Steve and all three of the supervisors, I want to assure you that Friends of Worcester is in support of that as a means of providing funding when open space becomes available. And we have begun conversations within our group, Friends of Worcester, of how we can support that. One of the things that we're looking at is the idea of Giving Tuesday, which happens right after Thanksgiving. And we're looking at that, and hopefully with Sean on board now, we'll be able to get together with him, and together we can work on ways of encouraging folks to contribute to that fund. So I just wanted to share that with you and let everyone know who's watching this that that's where we are.
Thank you, Bert.
Thanks, Bert.
Okay.
Appreciate that. And Jim?
Jim Alec, Worcester. Welcome to our new township manager. I think it's going to be easy for him. Just so you guys understand, I'm an expert at right to know. Okay? Ask Tommy, ask Bob Brandt, ask Garrity, ask all those guys. So what I'm going to tell you now, I'm giving you my expert opinion, is that I cannot get personal email addresses from you guys, right? So if you were given a petition with the email addresses and I requested it, you'd have to redact the personal email addresses, okay? So it's fallacy to think or believe that somehow, we don't want to give email addresses because requesters can get them. We can't. Believe me, I've been through it forever. There's a special exemption for that. Now, Winnie and Bert both said the emails were cut off because the concern for confidentiality. That's what I think I heard, confidentiality, right? Well, guess what? Got the addresses, home addresses. Well, if you're going to be worried about confidentiality, the home addresses are what you worry about, right? Because an email address, let's just even say I get it and send them an email they don't like, all they do is block me, right? But once you have somebody's home address, you can't block that. You're living at your house in that location, and there's no way around it. And actually, they were doxing people like the Supreme Court people with their addresses. They weren't doing email addresses, they were doing actual addresses. So again, I don't understand the rationale for not providing the township with the email addresses. And this way you can communicate with this group of people so they're getting the whole picture. I can't get it, but you guys certainly could use it and go forward with it. I heard something about, the cost of right to know, and requesters costing money for the district and here and there. Well, first of all, the amount of money spent on right to know in Worcester Township last year was $0. Zero, right? So everything is fine here, right? As far as Methacton goes, they had a solicitor who billed $900,000, who got fired because they billed the $900,000. And you got Eric Fry and Deshelle Bartolondoli in there now. And last month, it was $2,000. So you go from $900,000 to $80,000, which tells you it's not the requester, it's the lawyer. So when you put the lawyer in charge of the right to know process with no checks and balances, what do you think they do? Okay? So, you know, I don't want to go into the right to know cost because that's the Democrats' talking point over at Mafacton because they don't want you to know what's going on. So their talking point is, oh, these right to know requests. I'll give you an example. I did a right to know request almost 3 years ago, okay, for emails to the superintendent for X period of time. I gave them the case law that I used to actually create it. They denied it, appealed it to Common Pleas Court where I represented myself and beat them, and then appealed it to Commonwealth Court where they got beat again. And I get the emails. So here's a sample of what they were holding for 2.5 years, and they spent a couple $100,000 holding. There's something called the Mafacton Education Foundation over there, okay? You know who one of the biggest fundraisers for that foundation is? Dave Zerbe, the superintendent, right? Well, it's a 501c3 where the superintendent is one of the biggest fundraisers, and to top it all off, what the emails show is Dr. Zerbe is soliciting donations from vendors. It's not good. Well, it took me 2.5 years to get it, and they spent $200,000 trying to keep it from me, and now I've got it. Okay? So I would hope that here we don't have a situation where we're asking vendors to contribute and putting them under the pressure of whether or not they should contribute or not. So there is a utility to right to know, okay? And I think it's very important that we have a good right to know officer. Tommy Ryan was one of the best. $0 last year because he handled everything himself. No delay, no redactions. I mean, that's the way it should work. And under the right to know law, you cannot limit anybody's number of requests or the reason for the request. So it's all about transparency. I've always been about transparency. So I think you continue what you're doing here transparency-wise because I think it's fantastic. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Does anybody have any additional public comment? I think we're good. Motion to adjourn.